One of the biggest challenges and fears of farmers in soil analysis is to do with the cost. Farmers have always thought that soil analysis is a costly process, but upon working with farmers, we have realized that not testing is actually costly than testing the soil. If you don't test it, you don't know how to manage your soil and how to work with your soil. That's one of the key fears with farmers on soil analysis. And the second thing is, it has always been a thought that it's for those with money and those who can relate to the process using financial resources. But it's not a costly process. Any farmer who is doing farming can actually do soil analysis and benefit from soil analysis. That's one of the key strategies. One of the advantages of soil testing is it gives you information on which crops to grow. Being informed on which crops to grow. You can actually choose by the recommendation of a soil analysis to say, I'm planting this crop, because the nutrient analysis gives you guideline on how much you need for you to produce certain crops. So that gives a good indication on the choices that you are going to make. For example, when you get a soil analyzed, you get a recommendation to say, if you want to plant beans, you use 8 bags of fertilizer. If you want to plant maize, you need 15 bags of fertilizer on this land cumulatively. So automatically it gives you indication on the cost-benefit analysis of the direction to go based on the analysis that have come out. One of the key advantages of soil analysis is, let me put it this way, the soil has no funeral policy. Ivu harina funeral policy, and the soil can die. Ivu rinofa. Let me explain myself. When we say soil can die, we are simply referring to soil being a component that carries living organisms that actually die out of the variables that are in the soil. So by not understanding those variables, one of them being pH, we end up having a soil that has no capacity to maintain plant life, because the living organisms has a certain range of pH within which they can survive. If we exceed that range, those living organisms, they will die and our soil will die. And that's the capacity of the soil to support plant life. So if we don't analyze our soil, we don't know when, and we don't understand if our soil is still living or it's dead. When we are talking about soil pH, it's measured on a scale of 1 to 14, and 7 being the central point. 1 to 7, we are saying the soil is acidic, and it increases in acidity as you move from 7 towards 1. And it also increases in alkalinity as you move from 7 to 14. So to a farmer, we are simply saying, knowing your pH will help you understand that the more acidic or the more alkaline the soil, we are affecting the amount of nutrients that are available in the soil. Acidic soils limits the amount of nutrients that are available for plant uptake in the soil. And the same also applies with alkalinity. If the soil becomes alkaline, there are some nutrients that becomes unavailable for the plant. So we are simply saying, if you don't know your levels of pH and your soil is either alkaline or acidic, you can put 8 bags of fertilizer or your manure as recommended by your extension officer, but that will not translate into a yield or a productive plant, because the nutrients are available in the soil, but they are not available to the plant because of the potential hydrogen which is the pH in the soil, which is either acidic or alkaline. So it's a waste to add nutrients to the soil which you don't know the pH. because you lose out a lot of nutrients without knowing. I'll give an example of, I'll give an illustration of how soil pH works. For example, if you want to prepare sadza, you need heat, you need water, you need millimil for you to get sadza. If one of those variables is lacking, there's no sadza. So the same applies with pH. For you to get a yield, you need correct pH, correct nutrients, and the correct plants for you to grow. So to farmers, if you don't know the correct pH, even if all the variables are correct, you can as well apply the nutrients in the right crop, but it does not translate to a good yield. Correct pH plus correct nutrients equals to yield. Wrong pH plus correct nutrients equals to loss. For example, you have tested your soil and you realize that you have some percentage of nitrogen available, and what you are coming in with is to add to the required percentage. For example, I'll say for maize, let's say your soil has a nitrogen of 5 parts per million, and you need to take it up to 7 parts per million. So you only need 2 parts per million to add to the soil. That will then translate to the amount of fertilizer that you are going to apply, which is different from someone who has a 0 parts per million of nitrogen, who needs to start adding from 0. So we are simply saying, by having a soil analysis, you are being guided to say you want to get to point A, and how do you get to point A? You want to get to 5, and how do you get to 5? If you are at 0, you need 5 units. If you are at 4, you need 1 unit. So analysis guides you into determining those levels of addition to say you are adding this much because you have this much. An example is if a farmer is adding, by general recommendation, 8 bags of a compound fertilizer, and soil analysis will guide you to say, does your soil really needs the 8? Or probably you are putting 8, but your soil needs 10. Or maybe you are putting 10, but you are putting 8, but your soil would need 6. Ivhu rako rikaongororwa rikaonekwa kunzi muri kuda kuti uwedzere 5 masaga efertilizer, iwewe pageneral recommendation inogara itaurwa nemadhumeni ivhu risina kutestwa, panenge pachinzi isa mabhegi 8 efertilizer. Saka ukashandisa ivhu rako raongororwa waudzwa kuti isa 5, nekuda kwokuti waongororwa ivhu, wakutosevha mamwe 3 pahekta yoga yoga, wakutosevha mari yawanga uchashandisa pakutenga mamwe mabhegi 3 asiri kudiwa. Uyezve ukamaisa mabhegi 3 iwayaya asiri kudiwa, haana zvaari kunokubatsira, ari kungokudyira profiti yawanga uchaisa. Saka kuongororwa ivhu rako kunokubatsira kuti uzive zvekushandisa uye chipimo chekushandisa pakuisa ivhu rako. So I'm saying, by soil analysis, we are simply making sure we are saving in terms of what you put into the soil. If you get your soil analyzed, you are given a recommendation of application rate. Let's say general recommendation is you have to apply 8 bags of AN in your maize. And through soil analysis, you are recommended to apply 5 bags, which is 3 less, saving 3 bags per each application. We are simply saying each bag costs $30. So for $30 for every 3 bags, that's $90. And if you are saving $90 per hectare and you are doing 10 hectares, that's $900. $900 for a 10 hectare plot, that's a lot of money compared to a soil analysis which costs $20. So you are simply trading $20 against $900. You are saving $20 to lose $900. What are you doing as a farmer? It's more expensive not to test your soil than testing your soil. Now that you have analyzed your soil and you know the nutrient composition of the soil, it still doesn't guarantee you that you are going to get a good yield. You still need to address what are called the 4 other principles of nutrient management. And when you talk about the 4 other principles of nutrient management, we are looking at 1, the source of the nutrients. Where are your nutrients coming from, and how do you apply the nutrients? 2, we are looking at the quantity of nutrients that you need to apply. How much are you applying? 3, we are looking at the time of application. Everything is a function of time, and how it works is also a function of time. And the fourth one being the place. Where are you placing your nutrients? Are you placing them on top, underneath the ground, on the leaf surface? Those are the variables that you need to understand after having your soil analyzed. You might then run into a loss without understanding, even with the nutrient results that you have got, if you don't understand those 4 principles of nutrient management. When we talk about source, we are simply referring to where do you get your nutrients from? What is your source of nutrients? And we have different sources of nutrients, which are in the form of organic source or organic fertilizer, which is our ordinary manure, our compost, our vermicompost, and all other natural resources that we use as sources of nutrients. We also have synthetic sources. In synthetic, we are now referring to those fertilizers that you can go and buy from the shops, those that are provided by manufacturers with specific quantities and variables. Those are the different sources that we can use. So basically we have those 2 main sources, the organic and the synthetic one. Looking at the different sources, each source has its own advantage and disadvantage. So if we look at organic fertilizers, the advantage that we have in organic fertilizers is they provide us with nutrients, but those nutrients are not too much, they are not high, they are at moderate levels. But at the same time, they come in with a component of addressing other soil variables, such as introduction of microorganisms in the soil, also work in correction or adjustment of pH in the soil. So those are variables that come with addition of organic matter. And when you look at synthetic sources of nutrients, we are now looking at main factor only being nutrients. They only provide us with nutrients, and it doesn't come with other factors. So that's the difference between the 2 sources of nutrients that we can talk of. The other one bringing in a lot more of variables with it, the other one only addressing one variable, which is the nutrients. So when we are talking about microorganisms, we are simply saying we are introducing a powerhouse in the soil, which has got the capacity to generate more nutrients for you in the soil. So it's like you have built your solar system. It's a very common now that people are using solar system for powering their homes. So it's like you have built a solar system in your soil that has got the capacity to continuously provide you with power, in this case, which are nutrients. And if you don't have that, it's like you are relying on a ZESA power cable or electricity power cable. If it switches off, you are off. And the same applies if you are using synthetic fertilizers. You are simply relying on those for your provision of nutrients without having the capacity of the soil to continuously regenerate. So if you don't add the nutrients, you don't have them in the soil. That's the scenario. So that's the difference also between how you add organic matter into the soil and how you rely also on addition of synthetic nutrients into the soil. So for soil fertility management, introduction of microorganisms is like we are giving the soil a fishing rod. We are not giving the soil a fish. From a common Chinese proverb that if someone is hungry, you don't need to give him fish. You need to give the person the rod so that he fishes for him or herself. So in this case, we are simply saying we are giving the soil enough capacity to regenerate and produce nutrients on its own without having to rely on human input and interpretation of soil fertility management. So we are improving the soil regenerative capacity so that it can be sustainable. It can sustain itself without having to rely on what we provide to that soil. The other principle of the 4 other principles of nutrient management is the quantity of nutrients that you need to apply. So soil analysis gives you guideline on how much nutrients you need to apply. So when you have your soil tested, the soil analysis, it matches the amount of nutrients that are in the soil and the amount of nutrients that are required by the plant, and they give you a recommendation of your application rate. So you get to know how much you are applying, and that saves you a lot of money because you don't use your fertilizer or your nutrient source in excess than what is required. And in the same time, you don't pollute the environment by giving it more than what it can consume. You'll be using what is relevant, being informed by your soil testing results. The third principle is time, the right time. So whenever we are dealing with nutrient management, if we give the plant the nutrients at the wrong time, it's as good as we have not provided the nutrients. So we need to know the rightful quantities and to apply them at the right time. How much are we going to apply at this time of the at this time of the growth of the plant, or at the growth stage of the plant that we are dealing with? So it's important to know the right time that you need to apply the correct nutrients if you are to have a good yield. One of the typical examples of timing is if you are to apply your basal dressing after you have planted, for example, your maize, you are simply wasting your time because the nutrients won't be efficiently used. And the same applies if you want to apply your top dressing when your maize is already tasseling. It's as good as wasting your nutrients. You need to apply the nutrients at the right time so that you get the best results out of it. So soil testing informs us about the timing of application of the nutrients. So we are saying, for example, if you don't apply your basal dressing, for example, you are producing maize, and you don't apply your basal dressing at planting with the rightful quantities and in the right way, it's as good as those nutrients that you are applying would not benefit you, because basal dressing is critical for root development and crop establishment at the early stages, so that the plant can actually deepen its roots, have a crop establishment at the early stages. So coming in with the correct basal dressing recommendation and application rate when the plant is at knee height, it's merely a waste of time. You need to apply it at the right time so that the roots can actually develop and they can uptake nutrients at that stage, and you are guaranteed of a proper crop establishment at the early stages. The other principle of nutrient management is placement of nutrients at the right place. You can have all the variables correct, but if you don't apply the nutrients at the right place, it becomes useless. For example, you are coming in with your top dressing and you apply it on the surface and you don't cover it. Or you are using your manure, you apply your manure in the field and you don't cover the manure. You have applied, but it will not benefit the crop efficiently. So when you are placing nutrients, we are simply saying the nutrients has to be placed where they perform efficiently, and we need to know how to place those nutrients for them to effectively benefit the crop. So the summary to the four principles of nutrient management: we have the right quantity, the right place, the right time. So we have to take note of those variables in nutrient management, and they are all informed and based on your analysis of soil and how the soil scientist will recommend to you the way in which you are managing your soil. And if you need more training and capacity building on how to manage your soil efficiently and improve its soil life, you can always contact us for those capacity building sessions. So in this episode, we have looked at soil analysis, its benefit, and also looked at how do we manage nutrients for effectiveness. But we are also going to cover on the process of how we actually do the soil analysis. But before we get there, we need to set the basics right in terms of the basis of what all we are doing is about. So on that, we are going to focus on why exactly are we doing soil analysis? What is the intention? So looking at soil analysis, it gives us the analysis that are done, the N, the nitrogen, the phosphorus, the potassium, the pH. Those are indicators of certain circumstances in the soil. We need to go further and interrogate soil life and get to understand the living variables in the soil. Because the amount of nitrogen is what we are measuring in the soil, we are measuring what is in the soil in terms of the soil capacity to continuously provide the same. So we need to go a step further to look at the microorganisms or the part of life that is in the soil that is responsible for continuously generating and producing more of those nitrogen, more of those phosphorus, and more of those nutrients that we are looking at. That's the microbiology aspect of the soil. So when we talked about soil life, this is the life that we are talking about, to say we need to promote microorganisms in the soil, their survival, and we are not really focusing on the nutrients. So we are now looking at what has caused the headache in the soil of having no nutrients. Takutarisa chikonzero chaita kuti musoro uteme ndo chatakuda kugadzirisa. Now we want to address the challenge that has caused the headache by looking at what is the capacity of the soil to continuously generate and produce more nutrients. Then we focus on microbiology and microorganisms that are in the soil and promoting soil life to improve the capacity of the soil to continuously provide us with nutrients. That's key aspects of soil health that farmers need to understand. So the key aspects of microbiology that we are dealing with now is we are looking at the potential of the soil to regenerate and produce enough to support plant growth. So we are looking at the living organisms that we can see with our eyes and that we cannot see with our eyes. For example, the bacteria, the fungi. If we look at the balance of fungi and bacteria in the soil, it gives us an indication, a clear indication of the capacity of that soil to continuously generate nutrients for itself. So we have an analysis that also comes from soil analysis to inform the balance of those nutrients. We don't end at nutrients. Nutrients are proxy indicators, but we go further to interrogate the sources of those nutrients. How are they reproduced in the soil? That's when we interrogate the microorganisms to look at the balance of microorganisms in the soil and how they translate into production of nutrients in our soil. So when we are talking about soil life, we are talking about its capacity to support life in general. So life in general in the soil, we are simply referring to things that we can see with our eyes, which are microorganisms. For example, if we see ants, if we see termites, if we see the dung beetles in the soil, those are indicating life in that particular soil. And we also have bacteria and fungi, those we cannot see with our eyes. They are also part of the living organisms in the soil that we also need to promote their life and ensure they are in existence in the soil to continuously support soil life.